Welcome to tonight's sleep story. Let's drift into a soothing story together as you begin your journey into a restful and rejuvenating sleep. In a quiet corner of the world, where the fields stretch endlessly beneath the soft sky, there lived a young girl named Flax. Her days were woven with simplicity, each thread of her life tied to the rhythm of nature. The wind that whispered through the trees, the sun that warmed the earth, and the soil that cradled her hands. These were her companions. Flax lived in a small, humble house with her family, surrounded by the fertile land where she had learned to work from a young age. The smell of fresh earth, the crisp morning air, and the rustling of the flax plants were the familiar sounds that marked her world. Every morning, as the golden rays of the sun kissed the earth, Flax would step outside, her bare feet touching the cool, damp grass. She would kneel by the flax plants, her hands gentle as they caressed the tender stalks. The flax, though simple and often overlooked by others, held a quiet beauty for her. It was a symbol of her hard work, of the life she had known, and of the dreams that flickered softly in her heart, like the delicate petals of the flax flowers themselves. Flax was not rich in material wealth, but her life was rich in small, meaningful moments, the laughter shared with her family, the satisfaction of tending to the plants, and the gentle peace of living in tune with the land. Yet there was an unspoken longing within her, a feeling that one day the flax would bring her something more, something beyond the simplicity of her daily life. Most of all, toward the quiet wisdom that resides deep within your heart. As the seasons passed, Flax tended to the fields with the same quiet dedication. With each sunrise, she ventured out to care for the delicate plants, her hands moving as if they understood the rhythm of life itself. She didn't mind the long hours, nor did she feel the sting of the sun on her skin. The flax was her world, and the world was full of small wonders that only she seemed to notice. The way the wind would dance through the leaves, the soft hum of the earth beneath her, the gentle pull of the sky as if calling her into something greater. One day, as she worked, a stranger wandered into the village. He was a man of some means, dressed in fine clothes that shimmered in the sun. He paused by the flax fields and studied them, his eyes narrowed in curiosity. Flax, absorbed in her work, didn't notice him at first. When she finally lifted her head, their eyes met, and the man smiled. "How delicate your flax looks," he said, his voice rich and smooth like the honeyed warmth of the afternoon sun. "But tell me, why do you work so tirelessly for something so simple?" Flax, though taken aback by the question, smiled gently. "Simple as it may seem, the flax has always been with me," she replied, her voice steady as though her answer had been shaped by years of quiet reflection. "It is the soil that gives it life, and it is my hands that help it grow." The man looked at her, intrigued by her calmness and the depth in her eyes. "You do not seek more?" he asked, his gaze softening. "A life of riches, perhaps, power or fame?" Flax paused, her gaze drifting toward the flax plants swaying gently in the breeze. "I seek what is simple," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The flax brings me peace, and peace is all I need." Days turned into weeks, and the flax plants flourished under Flax's careful attention. The air was rich with the scent of earth and the soft perfume of the flowers that now dotted the fields. Each morning, as the sun slowly climbed over the horizon, Flax would walk among the plants, her fingers grazing the stalks, feeling their steady strength. The flax had grown tall, their once delicate stems now strong and steadfast, much like herself. Yet, despite the peace and beauty that surrounded her, a quiet ache lingered in her heart, a yearning for something that she could not yet name. It was during one of these quiet mornings, as Flax worked with her usual focus, that a thought passed through her mind. Could there be more to life than this? The question was fleeting, as if it came and went like a breeze, but it lingered in the corners of her thoughts. She had known this life for as long as she could remember the fields. The flax, the steady work. It was simple, yes, but it was also all she had ever known. Was this truly enough? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something beyond this quiet existence, something waiting for her to discover, something that would allow her to see beyond the rows of flax and the rhythm of daily labor. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Flax sat outside, gazing at the flax fields that stretched before her. The light of the setting sun bathed everything in golden hues, casting long shadows across the ground. The soft rustle of the flax in the evening breeze seemed to whisper to her, as if calling her to listen. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to be swept away by the sound, the feeling of the cool air on her skin, the stillness of the world around her. But in that quiet, something shifted inside her. The flax no longer seemed like just a simple plant. It was a symbol, a reminder of her labor, her dedication, and the quiet, unspoken dreams she had buried deep inside. She realized that the flax, though a humble crop, was also a reflection of her life, the seeds she had planted, the care she had given, and the growth that had come from it. And yet she could not ignore the truth that had begun to take root. Within her, the work she had done, the life she had lived, was only the beginning. There was more to her story than she had ever imagined. As the weeks passed, the seasons began to change. The once bright and lively flax plants were now heavy with their seeds, their golden stalks swaying gently in the autumn breeze. Flax worked diligently, her hands moving with purpose, carefully gathering the flax she had nurtured for so long. Each bundle she harvested was a testament to her hard work, her patience, and the quiet resolve that had guided her throughout her life. Yet, despite the abundance of the harvest, she could not shake the feeling that something was still missing. One morning, as she bent low to gather the final stalks of flax, the sun creeping just above the horizon, Flax heard a voice. It was soft at first, like a whisper in the wind, but it grew louder with each passing moment. She stood up, startled, her heart quickening in her chest. The voice was familiar yet unfamiliar, a voice that seemed to call to her from somewhere, deep within herself. Flax, the voice said, you have given so much, yet you have not given yourself the chance to dream. Flax looked around. but the only sound was the rustling of the flax plants in the wind. She was alone, as always, but the voice seemed to echo in her mind, reverberating through the stillness of the morning. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. "What do you mean?" She whispered softly, her voice barely above a breath. "I have always worked hard. I have always done my duty. What more could I want?" The voice responded, this time clearer, more insistent. "You have given everything to the flax, to the earth, to the village, but you have never asked for anything in return. You have never allowed yourself to dream of something more than this." Flax stood still, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the bundle of flax she had just harvested. The wind seemed to still, and the world around her felt suspended, as if waiting for her to understand. Her mind raced, her heart torn between the pull of her familiar life and the unknown possibilities that the voice seemed to offer. For the first time, she felt a stir of something inside her, a desire, a longing she had buried deep for so long. She thought back to the many years she had spent in the village, tending to the flax, never asking for more than what the earth had given her. She had lived a life of simplicity, of quiet service to her family and the land. But now, as the golden sun bathed the earth in its soft glow, she could not ignore the feeling that had awakened within her. There was a world beyond the village, beyond the flax fields, a world filled with dreams, with opportunities, with the chance to explore the depths of her own heart. It was a world that seemed both distant and within her reach, and for the first time, she felt ready to step into. It thought as Flax stood there, the voice faded into the wind, leaving behind a sense of calm resolve. She looked out over the fields, the flax now ready to be woven into something new. The plants had given their all, just as she had. And now, it was time for her to give herself the chance to grow, to dream, and to find her place in the world. Beyond the simple rhythms of her life, with a deep breath, she gathered the flax and began to walk toward the village. Her steps were slower now, but with a newfound purpose. She knew the path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time she felt as if the world was open to her in a way it never had been before. There was more to her life than the flax, and she was ready to discover what that was. The days grew shorter, and the air began to carry a crispness, signaling that the cycle of seasons was drawing to a close. Flax had finished gathering the last of the golden stalks, her heart swelling with both satisfaction and something more elusive, an emptiness she could no longer ignore. The harvest had been bountiful, yet as the flax dried in the sun, her mind seemed more unsettled with each passing day. For the first time in her life, she questioned the simplicity of her existence, the quiet rhythm that had once soothed her. The voice that had whispered to her in the morning still echoed in her mind, as though calling her toward something greater, something beyond the ordinary tasks of life. The flax had been her constant companion, but now, as she stood among the withered plants, she felt the weight of its silence, its stillness, pressing in on her. That evening, after the work of the day had ended, Flax found herself sitting alone on the stone steps of the cottage, her hands resting on her knees. The cool night air brushed against her skin, and the sky above was a blanket of deep blue, the first stars beginning to twinkle in the distance. The world felt vast, almost infinite, and for the first time in years, Flax felt small in it. She closed her eyes and allowed the quiet to wash over her, the soft rustling of the trees and the distant hum of nightfall filling the space around her. Yet, beneath the tranquility, there was an unspoken yearning, an aching desire to know what lay beyond the horizon. What was there beyond the flax fields, beyond the village she had known all her life? What else could life hold for someone like her, who had given so much and yet never asked for anything in return? Her mind wandered back to the words of the stranger she had met weeks earlier, his question lingering in her thoughts. "Do you seek more?" he had asked. At the time, she had dismissed it, thinking that her life, though humble, was enough. But now, the idea of seeking more didn't seem so distant. It felt like an invitation to live differently, to dream without the constraints of the world she had known. As Flax sat there, wrapped in the stillness of the evening, the reality of her situation pressed against her. She had lived her entire life without truly living for herself. Her days had been filled with work, her nights marked by quiet exhaustion. There had been no time for wonder, no space for aspirations beyond the needs of the earth and her family. But now, in the quiet of the night, something shifted within her. She realized that she could no longer stay in the shadows of her own existence, tethered only to the flax fields and the familiar rhythms of a life she had long since mastered. Stars above seemed to glimmer brighter, each one a tiny beacon, casting light on the thoughts swirling in her heart. Flax realized that for the first time, she was beginning to see her own potential, the possibility of becoming something more than she had ever imagined. The voice in her heart, the one that had urged her to dream, was no longer a distant whisper, but a calling she could not ignore. Her life had been simple, yes, but the simplicity had also confined her. She had been content, but now the quiet discontent had bloomed into something more. The flax was her legacy, but it was not her destiny. It was a part of her, but it did not define her. Flax stood slowly, her heart steady, and gazed out at the horizon. The world was vast, and she had barely scratched the surface of what it had to offer. She knew that the future would not be easy, that it would require courage, and that it would ask her to step away from the only life she had ever known. But she was ready. For the first time, Flax felt the stirrings of something new, something beyond the work of her hands and the simple existence of her days. With each breath she took, she felt more certain of her path. The flax might have been her foundation, but it was not her limit. There was a world waiting for her to discover, and she was ready to step into it. The days turned colder, and with each passing evening, the quiet of the world seemed to deepen. Flax stood at the edge of the village one morning, watching the mist rise from the earth, curling like a delicate veil over the fields. The wind was gentle today, whispering through the trees, and the sun, still shy behind the clouds, cast a soft, muted light over everything. The flax plants that had once filled her days with purpose now seemed distant, their quiet presence no longer enough to satisfy the longing she had discovered within herself. Flax had made her decision. She could no longer stay in the familiar, tending to the earth as though it were all that mattered. The call she had felt deep within her heart could not be silenced. She had been part of the land for so long, bound by its rhythms and its seasons. But now she knew that her journey had to take her beyond what she had known. There was a world waiting for her, one she had only glimpsed in dreams, and the time had come for her to step into it. She had not yet told her mother of her plans. How could she? How could she explain the restlessness that had settled within her, the desire for something more than the life they had built together? It wasn't that she didn't love the life she had. It was simply that she had come to understand that love was not enough to fill the gaps inside her heart. She needed to discover who she was outside of the flax fields, to step into the unknown with the same courage that had carried her through her days of quiet labor. That evening, she took a walk through the village, the cool autumn air wrapping around her like a soft blanket. As she passed the small houses, their windows glowing warmly with light, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. This place, these people had shaped her into who she was, and yet she knew that to grow, she would have to leave it all behind. The thought was bittersweet, but she understood that it was the only way forward. Her mother had always said that love was the greatest gift they could give each other, and Flax had given that love freely, without hesitation. She had worked tirelessly, cared for the fields, and kept the rhythms of life flowing without ever asking for more than what was needed. But now, as she stood on the threshold of something new, she realized that in order to truly love herself, she had to give herself the gift of freedom, the freedom to choose her own path, to chase the dreams that had begun to take root in her heart. As the stars began to twinkle above her, Flax felt a quiet stirring within. She had walked this earth for so long, following the same paths, tending the same crops, living the same days. But tonight something had shifted. The path ahead was still unclear, but she knew that it was hers to take. There was no more waiting for the right moment, no more holding back. She was ready to leave behind the life she had known and embrace. The unknown, with all its challenges and rewards. The flax, which had once been her everything, was now only the beginning. It had given her the strength to stand tall, but it was time for her to discover the strength within herself, to walk on her own and create a new story, one that was hers alone. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the cool night air fill her lungs, and made a silent promise to herself. She would follow her heart wherever it led, and she would do so with the same dedication and love she had always given to the earth. Asterisk. Do so with the same dedication and love she had always given to the earth. Tomorrow, the journey would begin, and though she was uncertain of what lay ahead, she felt a deep sense of peace within her soul. The unknown no longer seemed daunting. It felt like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The following morning, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Flax stood by the door of the cottage, her hand resting lightly on the worn wood. The world outside was still, the earth blanketed in a soft mist that clung to the grass like a secret. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she had both feared and hoped for. It was time to leave. Her heart fluttered in her chest, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. But beneath it all, there was a sense of clarity she had never felt before. She had always known what her life had been, what it was meant to be. The flax, the earth, the quiet rhythm of her days, they had all been a part of her, shaping her into the person she was. But now, standing on the cusp of something new, she could feel the weight of her decision. She was leaving behind the life she had known, stepping into a world where everything was unknown. Asterisk yet. As she stepped outside, the first rays of sunlight touched her face, and she felt the warmth spread through her. The earth, still damp from the morning dew, seemed to welcome her, as though it understood her need for change. She stood for a moment, allowing herself to drink in the beauty of the world around her, the quiet stillness that enveloped the land. It was as though the entire universe was holding its breath, waiting for her to make her move. Flax walked slowly, her feet pressing into the soft earth with each step, the familiar crunch of the grass beneath her feet, a sound she had known for years. She glanced back one last time at the cottage, the smoke rising lazily from the chimney, the small garden where she had spent countless hours tending to the plants. She would miss it, of course. It was home after all. But now, in this quiet moment, she knew that her heart was not tied to this place, not anymore. As she walked through the village, the familiar faces of the people she had known all her life greeted her with smiles, their voices a gentle murmur in the background. They did not know what she had decided, did not understand the weight of her choice. They saw only a young girl leaving her home, perhaps to explore the world beyond, but they could not know the depth of her journey. She did not feel the need to explain. The world, she realized, did not need to understand her choices. It was her heart, her soul, that had to be in tune with the path ahead. The road that lay before her seemed endless, winding through the forest and beyond, disappearing into the distance. But with each step, Flax felt herself growing stronger, more certain of the path she was on. The earth beneath her feet was steady, the sky above her vast and open, and she felt as though she were walking towards something larger than herself, something that had always been there, waiting for her to find it. She walked on the morning, air fresh and invigorating, filling her with a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. She felt the weight of her past gently lifting, replaced by the quiet anticipation of what lay ahead. There was no fear now, no uncertainty, only the steady rhythm of her heart beating in time with the earth, guiding her forward dot as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The mist began to fade, and the world around her came into sharper focus. The trees, the fields, the distant hills, all of it was waiting for her to discover, to explore, to embrace. For the first time, Flax felt as though she was truly alive, truly free. The road ahead was hers to walk, and she would walk it with courage, with love, and with the quiet strength she had always known, but never fully realized until now dawned. As Flax continued her journey, the landscape around her began to change. slowly at first, but unmistakably. The gentle rolling hills of her village gave way to dense forests, where towering trees seemed to stretch endlessly toward the sky, their branches swaying with the whisper of the wind. The air here was thicker, filled with the earthy scent of damp moss and the soft rustle of leaves underfoot. Every step she took seemed to carry her deeper into the unknown, and with each step, Flax felt a mix of awe and trepidation swell within her. The road, once familiar and comforting, now seemed distant, winding through unfamiliar territory. She was no longer walking through the flax fields, where every turn and every plant was a part of her. She was walking into a world that was strange and vast, full of untold possibilities and hidden challenges. The weight of her decision leaving behind the life she had always known was heavy, yet there was a lightness within her, a sense of liberation she had never experienced before. With every step, she shed the expectations of her past, embracing the freedom to become something more, something beyond the flax that had defined her existence. As the day wore on, Flax found herself coming to a small clearing in the forest. The sunlight filtered through the canopy of trees, casting delicate beams of light on the forest floor, where a blanket of soft moss spread like a welcoming carpet. She paused for a moment, taking in the beauty around her, the stillness that seemed to wrap itself around her like a protective embrace. The gentle hum of nature, the distant song of birds, the rustling of the leaves, the whisper of the wind filled the air, creating a soothing melody that calmed her mind and heart. She sat down on the moss, her fingers grazing the cool, soft surface as she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Her journey had only just begun, but already she felt a transformation taking place within her. The girl who had walked out of the village that morning, full of uncertainty and longing, was no longer the same. She had stepped into a world of possibility, and with each passing moment, she was discovering parts of herself she had never known. There was strength in her that she had not realized, a deep reservoir of courage that had been lying dormant, waiting to be awakened. As she sat there, letting the peaceful stillness of the forest seep into her soul, Flax realized that this journey was not just about discovering the world outside. It was also about discovering the world within. She had spent so many years tending to the flax, to the earth, to the needs of others, that she had forgotten to tend to herself. She had forgotten to dream, to imagine what her life could be beyond the confines of her village. Now in the quiet of the forest, she could hear the whispers of those dreams, rising from the depths of her heart like forgotten songs. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The day was drawing to a close, and with it, Flax felt a deep sense of peace. She stood up slowly, brushing the moss from her hands, and began to walk once more. The road ahead was still uncertain, but now she understood something profound. She was not alone on this journey. She carried within her all the love, strength, and wisdom she had gathered from her life in the village. The flax had shaped her, but it was her heart, her spirit, that would guide her forward. With each step, she felt more connected to the world around her, more connected to herself. The unknown, once a source of fear, now seemed like an invitation. She was ready to embrace it, to explore it, to live it fully. There would be challenges ahead. There would be moments of doubt, but Flax knew now that she was strong enough to face them. She had walked away from the flax fields, but she had not walked away from who she was. She had simply stepped into the next chapter of her life, and it was a chapter that was hers to write as the first stars began to twinkle in the night sky. Flax smiled to herself, feeling the weight of the past gently fall away. She was no longer just the girl who tended the flax. She was the woman who had chosen to follow her dreams, to step into the unknown with courage and hope. And in that moment, she knew that this journey, though just beginning, would lead her to a life filled with discovery, purpose, and a deep, unwavering sense of fulfillment. As the weeks passed, Flax found herself slowly adjusting to the new world she had stepped into. The forest, which had once seemed so vast and unknown, now felt like a quiet companion, a place where she could find peace and solitude. The path she walked was no longer just a road through unfamiliar territory. It had become a journey of self-discovery, each step a new lesson, each day a new revelation. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Flax found herself at the edge of a small stream. The water, clear and shimmering in the fading light, bubbled over the smooth stones, creating a soft, soothing melody that filled the air. She knelt by the water's edge, letting the coolness of the stream flow over her hands, feeling the refreshing chill of the mountain runoff as it slipped through her fingers. For a moment, she simply sat there, letting the peaceful rhythm of the water wash over her, feeling a sense of calm settle deep within her as the sun dipped lower. The world around her seemed to slow down. The distant chirping of birds faded into the background, and the wind, which had been gentle all day, now carried a deeper, more melancholic note. Flax could feel the change in the air, the shift that came with the setting of the sun. It was a reminder that time was passing, that the seasons were changing, and that she too was changing. She no longer felt like the girl who had left her village so long ago. She was becoming someone new, someone more in tune with herself and the world around her. Yet, even as she embraced the changes within her, there was still a longing, a quiet ache in her heart that she could not quite name. She had found peace in the forest, yes, but she had also discovered that there was more to her life than simply being at peace. She had always believed that happiness lay in the simplicity of the earth and the quiet labor of her hands. But now, she understood that true fulfillment was not just in the work she did, but in the life she created for herself. In the dreams she allowed herself to nurture, Flax stood up slowly, gazing at the stream as it flowed endlessly toward the horizon. She had always been someone who worked with her hands, someone who found purpose in the tangible, in the physical world. But now she realized that she also needed to nurture her soul, to give space for her own dreams to grow. The flax had always been a part of her, a symbol of her connection to the earth. But it was time to let go of the limitations that the flax had come to represent. She began walking along the stream, her feet sinking into the soft earth with each step. The path ahead was still unclear, and there were moments when doubt crept into her heart, when she wondered if she had made the right choice in leaving everything behind. But with each step she took, the doubts grew quieter and the pull of her heart grew stronger. She knew that this was the path she was meant to walk, that the dreams she had carried with her were not just fleeting desires, but part of who she was. The moon rose higher in the sky, casting a silver glow over the world. Flax stopped for a moment to look up at the stars, her eyes tracing the constellations that had guided so many before her. She had always looked to the stars for guidance, but tonight, for the first time, she felt as though the stars were looking back at her, as if the universe was acknowledging her journey, her choices, and the strength it had taken for her to get here dot as she continued walking. Flax realized that this journey was not just about discovering the world outside, but about embracing the world within. She was no longer just the girl from the village, tending to the flax, to the land. She was becoming something more, someone who was learning to follow her heart, to trust in the process of her life, and to believe in the dreams that had always been a part of her, waiting to be realized. The night was quiet, the world at peace, and for the first time, Flax felt at home in it. She had come so far, but she knew that her journey was far from over. There was still so much to discover, so much to learn, but now, with the moon shining above and the stars as her guide, she felt ready to face whatever the future held. As the days turned into weeks, Flax found herself standing at the edge of a new beginning, the path ahead as uncertain as it was inviting. The forest, once a place of unfamiliarity, had become her sanctuary, a space where she could truly hear herself think, feel, and dream. The seasons had shifted, and so had she. Her heart, once so tightly bound to the rhythms of the flax fields, now beat in tune with the pulse of the earth itself, as though she were part of a larger, grander design that extended far beyond the borders of the village. She was no longer simply working the land. She had become part of the land, part of the sky, part of the stars. One evening, as she sat by the firelight, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls of her humble cabin, Flax's thoughts turned to the life she had left behind. It wasn't that she regretted her choice to leave the village, nor was it the work itself that she missed. It was the people, the quiet familiarity of their lives, the simple joys of shared meals and conversations. Her heart tugged at the memories, but she knew deep down that those days had served their purpose. They had shaped her, yes, but they had also held her back. They had defined her, but only in ways that were limiting. Flax knew now that she could not remain forever in the shadow of what had been. She had to step forward into the unknown to embrace the fullness of her own story. There is so much more to discover, so much more to experience. The world beyond her small cabin and the surrounding forests was vast, filled with infinite possibilities that called to her in ways she had never imagined. Her dreams were no longer confined to the quiet hopes she had once whispered to herself in the still of the night. They were loud now, vibrant, alive. They were pushing against the walls of her mind, demanding to be realized. The wind outside picked up, rustling the trees in the distance, and Flax could feel the shift in the air, a sign that change was coming. She stood up slowly, stretching, her limbs as if waking from a long, peaceful slumber. She stepped to the window, her fingers brushing against the cool glass, and gazed out into the night. The moon hung high in the sky, casting its silvery light across the landscape, illuminating the vastness of the world before her. The landscape was bathed in this quiet, ethereal glow, and for a moment Flax felt small and significant even. But then, as her gaze traveled to the horizon, she saw something else, a vast, endless expanse that was full of promise. The road ahead was still uncertain, filled with twists and turns, but it was her road, and that was all that mattered. She had made her choice, and now the world was waiting for her. Flax had learned that the only way to truly understand herself, to truly become who she was meant to be, was to step into the unknown, to trust that the universe would guide her as is. She needed it to. She had worked so long in the fields, so long under the watchful eyes of those around her, that she had forgotten how to trust herself. But now she was learning. Now she knew that the seeds of her future had already been planted, and it was time to let them grow. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting a warm glow around the room. Flax took a deep breath, feeling the heat of the fire spread through her body, bringing a deep sense of comfort and strength. She knew that tomorrow would be the day she left. Tomorrow, she would take the first step on the path she had been too afraid to walk before. She would leave the safety of her familiar life and move toward something new, something that had always been waiting for her. She looked one last time at the cabin, the place where she had spent so many quiet nights, and allowed herself a moment of gratitude for everything it had given her. The earth, the flax, the wind, they had all taught her something invaluable, something that she would carry with her as she journeyed onward. The world was waiting for her, and she was ready. She closed her eyes, the soft rhythm of her breath filling her mind, and allowed herself to feel the peace that had finally settled in her heart. In the distance, the moon continued its steady rise, casting its soft silver light over everything below. Flax stepped into the night, the air cool against her skin, her heart beating with a quiet excitement. This was it. The journey had begun. As Flax walked farther from the village, the weight of her decision gradually lifted, replaced by a profound sense of clarity. Each step she took felt like a piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The world around her, once vast and intimidating, now seemed full of possibilities. The trees that lined her path whispered secrets she was only beginning to understand. The gentle rustling of the leaves was no longer just a sound. It was a song that seemed to echo her heart's quiet rhythm. With every passing moment, Flax felt more connected to the earth beneath her feet, more at peace with the decision she had made. The long stretch of road before her no longer seemed daunting. It was her road, winding and uncertain, yet full of promise. Her thoughts shifted from doubt to excitement as she imagined the world beyond the forest, beyond the village she had always known. There was so much to discover, so much to learn. The world had always seemed like something out of reach, something distant and mysterious. But now it was closer than ever, as if it had been waiting for her to take the first step. The wind picked up slightly, and Flax wrapped her shawl a little tighter around her shoulders. The chill in the air reminded her that the seasons were indeed changing, but she wasn't afraid of the cold. She had faced much worse in her life, harder days, longer nights, and yet here she was, stronger than ever. The cold air seemed to sharpen her senses, filling her lungs with the fresh, earthy scent of pine and damp soil. It was invigorating, reminding her that she was alive, truly alive in a way she had never experienced before. As the day wore on, Flax found herself walking along a narrow path that wound through the forest. The trees on either side were dense and towering, their thick branches creating a canopy overhead, letting only specks of sunlight filter through. The path was uneven, sometimes rocky and other times soft with moss, but Flax didn't mind. Each step was a reminder that she was moving forward, and that was all that mattered. The world was vast, yes, but she had come to understand that she didn't need to understand it all right away. The journey itself, with its twists and turns, was enough. For the first time, Flax felt the weight of her past no longer define her. It had shaped her, yes, but it no longer controlled her. She was no longer just the girl from the village, the one who had toiling away in the flax fields for a life that felt too small for her dreams. She was someone new, someone who had discovered the strength to embrace the unknown. She had stepped away from the safety of the familiar, and in doing so, had begun to find parts of herself she hadn't known were there. The afternoon sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Flax paused, allowing herself a moment to rest. She lowered herself to the ground, her back against the trunk of a sturdy oak, and closed her eyes. The sounds of the forest filled her ears, the distant calls of birds, the rustling of small animals, and the underbrush, the occasional crack of a twig underfoot. She breathed deeply, feeling the connection between herself and the earth grow even stronger. It wasn't just the land that was teaching her, but also the stillness, the quiet that surrounded her, urging her to listen, to hear the deeper truths that lay hidden in the world. Flax realized that the journey she had begun was not just about the places she would visit or the experiences she would have. It was also about the inner journey, the growth that would happen inside her as she learned to trust her heart, to listen to the whisper of her dreams, and to embrace the freedom she had fought so hard to find. As the last light of the day began to fade, Flax stood up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The night was falling gently around her, the stars beginning to appear one by one in the vast sky. The forest, now bathed in the cool silver light of the moon, seemed to welcome her, as though it had always known she would come. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Flax felt ready to meet whatever lay ahead, knowing that she had the strength within her to face it all. With a deep breath, she set her gaze on the horizon, her heart filled with the quiet confidence that comes only from knowing that you're exactly where you're meant to be. The journey, was hers to make, and she would walk it with open eyes, open heart, and open hands. The days turned into weeks, and Flax's journey continued with quiet determination. The road stretched ahead, winding through the dense forest and rolling hills, a path she had never traveled before but felt strangely familiar to her now. The world around her seemed vast, yet there was a sense of comfort in its vastness, as if the earth itself was embracing her, guiding her toward something greater. She felt the pull of the land beneath her feet, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat matching the pulse of the earth. Each step felt purposeful, each day a discovery, a step closer to something she had yet to fully understand. Flax had always been someone who worked with her hands, who measured her worth by what she could build, what she could grow. But now, she was learning to measure her worth in different ways. She was no longer just the girl who tended the flax, who lived by the seasons and the soil. She had become someone who could look beyond the physical world, someone who could hear the quiet whispers of her heart, guiding her through the uncertainties of life. She had begun to understand that there was more to living than simply existing. Life was not just about survival, it was about fulfillment, about finding peace not only in the work she did, but in the journey she was on. As the road led her through a new stretch of forest, Flax found herself standing before a wide, flowing river. The water sparkled in the sunlight, its surface shimmering with a million tiny reflections like the stars above. She stood there for a long while, watching the water rush past, the sound of its movement filling the air. There was something mesmerizing about the river, the way it seemed to carry everything with it, flowing without hesitation, without doubt. The river didn't question where it was going. It simply followed its path, trusting the journey it was. On, Flax knelt by the river's edge, dipping her hands into the cool water. It was refreshing, invigorating, as though the river was cleansing her, washing away the doubts that had clung to her heart. For a moment, she simply sat there, allowing herself to feel the connection between the land, the water, and the sky. Above, the world was so much bigger than she had ever imagined, and yet, in that moment, she felt small and insignificant, and yet perfectly at home. She thought of the flax, the way it had shaped her life, the way it had given her purpose. It had been the constant in her world, the steady presence that had held her grounded. But now, as she looked at the river, she understood something. The flax was not her destiny. It had been her foundation, but it was only one part of her story. There was more to her journey than the soil, the plants, and the work. There was a world out there, waiting for her to explore, to discover, to embrace. The river, with its endless flow, reminded her that life was a journey, not a destination. It was a path of constant change, of movement, of growth. Flax stood up, feeling the weight of her thoughts settle in her heart. She knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, that there would be moments of doubt and fear, but she also knew that she was ready. The dreams she had carried with her for so long were no longer distant fantasies. They were real, alive within her, and it was time for her to step into them fully. The river had shown her that the journey was not about the destination, but about the the trust you place in yourself to navigate the unknown. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs, and smiled to herself. The world was waiting for her, and she was ready to meet it. As she continued her walk, the sound of the river still echoing in her mind, she felt a sense of peace and excitement settle in her heart. This was her journey, and she would walk it with the same dedication and courage that had carried her this far. The path ahead was still unclear, but for the first time, Flax was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had embraced it, welcomed it, and in doing so, she had begun to embrace herself. The flax had taught her many things, but it was the journey beyond the flax that would teach her what she was truly capable of. And as she walked forward, the stars above shining brightly, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the road that had brought her here, and for the road that still lay ahead. The night grew quiet. The world around Flax bathed in the soft glow of the moon, casting its silvery light over the landscape. She had traveled far from the village now, the familiar sights and sounds of her past life fading into distant memories. But tonight there was no sense of loss, only the peaceful certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The stars above her seemed to shine brighter than ever, as if they were companions on her journey, offering silent encouragement. Guiding her through the darkness, Flax walked deeper into the forest, her feet light on the earth, her heart open to whatever came next. The path ahead was still winding, full of unknowns, yet she no longer felt the weight of uncertainty. The journey had transformed her, and with each step, she felt more grounded, more connected to the world around her. The forest, once so vast and intimidating, now felt like a trusted companion, its quiet strength surrounding her like a protective embrace. She had come to understand that the forest was not just a physical place, it was a symbol of the journey within herself, the space where she could shed the old layers and step into a new version of who she was becoming. Asterisk. As she walked, the sound of the wind in the trees became a gentle symphony, a soft melody that seemed to carry with it the wisdom of the ages. The leaves rustled above her, the sound almost like a whisper, as if the forest itself were speaking to her. She had always been attuned to nature, but now the connection felt deeper, more profound. It was as though the very earth beneath her feet was speaking, urging her to listen, to feel, to understand that she was a part of something far greater than herself. Flax paused for a moment to breathe in the cool night air. It was crisp and fresh, filled with the scent of pine and earth. Her chest expanded with each inhale, and she closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the stillness wash over her. This was the peace she had longed for, the peace that had always eluded her in the busy rhythms of her village life. It was not just the absence of noise, but the presence of something deeper, something that filled the space inside her with calm, with clarity. In the quiet of the forest, she had found the space to hear her own thoughts, to feel her own heart dot. It was in this moment that Flax realized something. She had spent her whole life tending to the flax, working the earth, focusing on the physical, the practical, that now she understood that life was not just about what she could do, but about who she was becoming. The work, the labor, it was important, yes, but it was the dreams, the quiet aspirations that lay within her heart that had the power to shape her future. For so long, she had defined herself by the work of her hands, by the tasks she performed, day in and day out. But now, as she stood in the moonlit forest, she realized that the true work was the work of the soul, the journey inward that would lead her to understand her own worth, her own potential. Flax began to walk again, this time with a greater sense of purpose. She was no longer just walking to escape her past. She was walking toward her future. The road was still uncertain, but the uncertainty no longer felt like something to fear. It felt like a blank page, ready to be filled with her own story. She had spent so much time following the paths laid out before her by her family, by the land, by the expectations of those around her. But now, she was charting her own course. And though the future was unknown, she felt a quiet excitement stirring within her, a sense that the world was wide open, waiting for her to step into. Fitfully, the night deepened, and the stars shone with quiet brilliance above her. Flax felt the weight of the world shift, as if it were aligning itself around her in perfect harmony. She had taken the first step into the unknown, and with it, she had taken the first step toward discovering the fullness of her own life. The road ahead was not without challenges, but for the first time she felt ready. She would face whatever came with an open heart, and the quiet strength that had always resided within her. As she continued on, the path ahead no longer seemed so daunting. The forest, the stars, the gentle breeze, it all felt like a part of her, a reflection of the inner journey she had begun. Flax smiled softly to herself, the weight of her old life now a distant memory. She was walking toward something new, something wonderful, and the world was waiting for her to discover it. As Flax walked on, the world around her seemed to shift, subtly yet profoundly. The air, once heavy with the scent of pine and earth, now carried a hint of something new, a fragrance that spoke of spring, of fresh beginnings, of the promise of change. The road she walked had once been merely a path to somewhere unknown, but now it felt like a bridge between two worlds. The life she had known, rooted in the soil of the village, and the life she was about to create, one that would be shaped by her own hands, her own choices. The trees around her began to thin, and the landscape opened up, revealing a vast expanse of fields stretching out before her, bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground, and for a moment, Flax felt as though the world had paused, holding its breath, waiting for her to take the next step. She stopped walking, her eyes taking in the beauty of the landscape, so much open space, so much possibility. Had always been someone who lived by routine, by the steady rhythms of the earth and the seasons. The flax, the work, the long hours in the field, they had been constants in her life, pillars of stability and purpose. But now, as she stood in this open space, Flax realized that she was no longer confined to those rhythms. The world was wide, filled with endless opportunities, and she had the power to choose what came next. It was a realization that both thrilled and humbled her. She had spent so long following the paths laid out for her, but now she was creating her own path, one step at a time. The breeze picked up, swirling around her, lifting strands of hair from her face as it brushed against her skin. Flax closed her eyes for a moment, letting the wind carry away the last remnants of doubt that lingered in her heart. She had made the decision to leave her old life behind, but there had still been moments of uncertainty, moments when she questioned whether she was strong enough to face the unknown. But now, standing in this wide open space, she felt the full weight of her decision settle into her bones. She was ready. Flax opened her eyes and began walking again, this time with a sense of purpose that she had never felt before. The road ahead was still uncertain, yes, but it was hers to travel. She no longer feared the unknown. She embraced it. With each step, she felt herself growing stronger, more confident, more certain of who she was and what she wanted from life. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, Flax found herself at the edge of a small village. The houses were simple, humble, much like the one she had grown up in, but there was something different about this place. It felt alive with possibility, a place where new beginnings could take root. Flax paused at the edge of the village, her gaze sweeping over the cottages and the fields beyond. She could see the promise of a new life here, a life that was not defined by the past, but by what she could create with her own hands. She knew that this would be her new home, at least for a time. The village held the quiet potential she had been searching for, a place where she could start over, where she could plant the seeds of her future. There would be work to do, of course, but Flax now understood that work was not just about survival. It was about creating something meaningful, something that would sustain her body and her spirit. With a deep breath, she stepped into the village, the weight of the past finally lifting from her shoulders. She had left behind the life she had known, a life of toil and routine, and had stepped into a new chapter of her story. The future, once a distant dream, was now a reality she could shape with her own hands. Flax felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the Flax that had taught her patience and strength, and for the courage she had found within herself to embrace the unknown. As the sun set behind the hills, Flax stood in the center of the village, looking out at the horizon. The world was vast, full of possibilities, and she was ready to explore it. She was no longer the girl who had worked flax fields in the village. She was someone new, someone who had chosen her own path, and for the first time in her life, Flax felt truly free. The journey had only just begun. The night had fully settled over the world, and the moon hung high in the sky, casting its gentle silver light over everything. Flax stood still, taking in the quiet beauty of the night, feeling the cool breeze brush against her skin, carrying with it the fresh scent of earth and pine. She had walked a long way from the girl she once was, from the life she had known, and now, standing at the edge of this new chapter, she felt a deep sense of peace within her. The path ahead, though uncertain, no longer seemed daunting. It was a road she had chosen for herself, one she had walked with courage and hope. She had left behind the familiar rhythms of the flax fields, the village, and the life of simplicity that had once defined her. But in doing so, she had found something far more valuable: the freedom to live life on her own terms, to follow the quiet stirrings of her heart dot as Flax looked up at the stars. She couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder at how far she had come. The stars, so distant and yet so bright, seemed to mirror the journey within her. She had always looked to the sky for guidance, for answers, and now she realized that the answers had always been within her. She had carried the seeds of her future all along, but it was only by stepping into the unknown, by leaving behind the life she had known, that she had finally begun to see them take root. The wind picked up once more, rustling the leaves of the trees, the sound a gentle reminder of the constant, unspoken connection between herself and the world around her. Flax closed her eyes and took a deep breath, the crisp night air filling her lungs, grounding her in the present moment. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The past, with all its lessons and challenges, had shaped her into who she was now, but it no longer held her back. She had embraced her journey, and now it was time to embrace her future. Her journey had not been easy. It had been filled with moments of doubt, moments of fear, and moments of quiet strength. But through it all, Flax had discovered something far more important than the flax she had tended to all her life. She had discovered herself. She had learned that the key to fulfillment was not found in the things she could touch or possess, but in the quiet whispers of her heart, the dreams she dared to follow, and the strength to walk her own path. The road ahead was still long, and there would be challenges along the way, but Flax knew now that she was ready. She had the courage to face whatever came her way, to embrace each moment, each challenge, each joy with an open heart. The journey she had begun was not just about finding her way in the world, but about creating a life that was true to herself. With the stars above her and the world stretching out before her, Flax took her first step into the night, the moonlight, guiding her forward. There was no longer any uncertainty, only the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and where you're meant to go. As she walked, the world seemed to open up, and for the first time in her life, Flax truly felt free. She was walking not just into the night, but into the life she had always dreamed of, a life filled with endless possibilities, love, and the quiet strength of her own heart. And so, with the moon shining brightly above and the world stretching out before her, Flax continued on her journey, knowing that every step she took was a step closer to the life she had always been meant to live. The flax had taught her many things, but it was the road ahead, the path she would carve for herself, that would teach her everything she needed to know.